Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network, and today's topic is curating our stories. We live within a narrative of our lives that we generate, and we don't even always have awareness that this is the case. But bringing those stories to awareness and consciousness and curating them with care can profoundly impact the quality of our lives. So that's what today's conversation is going to be. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light, lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to start the week with you. And welcome to everybody else who's joining us. So today we're talking about curating our stories. And it comes to mind that years ago, I was in a conversation with someone and I said, well, that's your story. And they took such offense to it. Like, they were fabricating something, or that I was accusing them somehow of something. And the truth is, we do make up the stories of our lives, and then we live within the context of those stories. And this just, it was so vividly clear in work with a client recently, where one of the things that came in the session was, I said, put your attention on your feet. And they said, my feet are under siege. And when that shows up in the context of a session, it's a great thing to work with. So, what does it mean that your feet are under siege? What does that look like? Are there soldiers attacking, or like, what does it look like that your feet are under siege? And as a result of their feet being under siege, they didn't walk very much, and they had this conversation about being wobbly when they walk, and rather than maybe needing to take extra care when they walk, or that simply what the fact of the matter was that there were places on their feet that had numbness to them. And it was very interesting because one of the things that this person was looking to achieve was a groundedness. And so if your feet are numb, it's hard to sense the ground, right? So I thought that was really, really interesting. But these conversations about ourselves that we have, these narratives that we have about who we are, what life is like, what the world is like, what other people are like, what the circumstances of our lives are. And we live as though they're reality. And in truth, they are narratives, they're stories that we're creating. And so one of the things that I said to this person was, I really encourage you to curate your stories. Another story was that their father that they were abandoned, that their father had abandoned them, that their mother had abandoned them. And in our session, we discovered at a later point in life where their father had really been there for them and seen them and supported them in the fulfillment of their essential expression. And recognizing that transformed the other story entirely, transformed this notion of having been abandoned, that it put a very different spin on the story. And so when I said it's really important to curate your story, they said, well, what do you mean? And I just explained or you illustrated going through changing my feet are under siege to I have some numbness on my feet. Like, hello, there's a pretty radical difference in the experience of that, right? And my father abandoned me, and I am abandoned versus my father actually supported me in my authentic expression. Pretty radical shifts. Same history and a reinterpretation of events. With another client, this person had been really tortured by their mother growing up. And what they came to was that their mother trained them really effectively to be able to be the person that they are in the world, to be the influence and the voice that they are in the world. And it might not have been a comfortable training ground, but it was powerfully effective. So we know the saying, there are two sides to every story. Well, there's a multitude of sides to every story. And all of those multitudes probably converge into what might be the truth, but our perspectives are narrowed. And why not consciously hone them, consciously attend to the stories we're telling ourselves? And when we are able to consciously recognize them, then we can impact them. Then we can find a new story to tell. And when we find a new story to tell, our whole experience of the entire world is different. So I'm wondering, what kind of stories are you telling yourself that could be more empowering about yourself, about your family, about your history, about the world? How can you create a story that actually supports you in your greater expression, in your greater fulfillment, in creating a life that you love? So really, I invite you to look at the kinds of things that you tell yourself, because we have this narrative going all the time, and most of us do. And most of the time, we're not even aware that it's happening. We are not even conscious of it. We don't even consciously hear it, this narrative. But it's going on. There's like this constant chatter and storytelling. We are consummate storytellers. I was listening to NPR over the weekend, and there was a piece on liars where two experts or researchers around lying had written a book, and they one of the things that they were talking about is making the distinction between lies and tall tales. So tall tales, typically everybody who is engaged in the experience, the teller and the listener, are all aware that these stories are not true. The thing is that we're not aware that the stories we tell are not true with a capital T. We live as though they are. We act as though they are. We react as though they are. But they're not. They're partial truths at best. They are jaundiced truths where they are stilted, right? They are expressive of a particular vantage point. And the thing is that those vantage points are mutable. And we're the ones that get to mutate them. So I wonder, like, if you look at yourself, look at a story that you tell yourself or about what's possible or about your history or about the world. Look at the story that you're telling yourself and notice what is the response to that story. What does that story feel like in your body? Where does it reside in your body? And what are the sensations associated with that story? If the story is creating constriction and confinement and unhappiness and possibly guilt or shame or resentment or rage, how might you be able to shift that story to empower yourself? This is a really important, powerful question. This is an important and powerful practice to notice, what are you feeding yourself all the time? Half the time, the narrative that's going on in our head isn't our own. Half the time, it's stuff we just absorbed from our culture, from our families, from being told certain things like spells. We've talked about spells before, that people will tell you who you are, and they'll tell you you're an achiever, or they'll tell you you're a failure. They'll tell you you're brilliant, or they'll tell you you're stupid. And then we adopt these stories. These are stories. And they might be tall tales. The likelihood is, well, they're not tall tales because we're not aware that they're not true. We've accepted them as truth. And so we get to question that. We get to question the stories we've been told. And we get to feel into them, to notice, are the stories that we are now telling ourselves, are these stories that we have taken ownership of and that we are embodying in some way or another? Are these stories empowering us? Are they serving us in such a way that they support us in better serving the world? Or are they limiting us? Are they constraining us? Are they oppressing us? And if we notice that there's this constriction, this feeling of oppression, this feeling of depression, this feeling, all kinds of feelings that are less than positive for us, less than affirming, less than vitalizing, what can we do to create a story or recreate that story or remove that story to better support ourselves? So when we talk about curating, let's say you were curating an art collection, what would that look like? That would look like taking care of the valuable pieces. It would be having them be in wonderful picture frames, for example. They'd be well framed. They'd be hung properly and beautifully on the walls. You would remove certain images that were not fitting in harmony with the collection. And so when we look at curating our stories, there are stories that we've carried our lives, our whole lives, that get to be released. And the thing is that so many of us who are aware, who are in a quest for awareness and for awakening, create all these stories about our lives and why certain things are the way they are and who we are and why it's evolved that way. And we have all these stories and they're not always empowering. They're often justifying. They're often justifying the things that are keeping us stuck. And I know people who have benefited tremendously from therapy, and I also know other people who have just learned better how to explain why they are the way they are, to justify why they are the way they are. The stories become the lens through which we then experience the world and ourselves and each other. And the thing is that we didn't even realize we get to author them, or at the very least, edit them, right? We can go through those stories with a red pen. We can write whole new paragraphs, whole new chapters. We can strike out the things that don't belong in the story. We can curate it. Curate our collection of stories that make up our experience. So I invite you, like, just let's look. What's a story that you've had? So a story that I've had that I'm challenging myself right in this very moment is that I grew up in a household with conditional love, and that therefore I don't know what unconditional love is. That's a story. And the thing is that maybe the love in my household was being expressed in ways that weren't the ways I wanted to be loved, or in ways that I didn't recognize. That there were wounds there that made love more camouflaged, less accessible to me at that moment. I'm in the midst of recreating the story, so right here in real life time. So I don't know what it's going to emerge to be. But we get to curate our stories. What does it look like? What does it look like to be living in the story that you're living in? What might be different if that story were different? We have this power. See, this is what's so important for us to know. We do have the power to recreate these things. This person's life was changed by recognizing that their father had given them the keys, essentially, to their most authentic expression, to recognizing that their father saw them and was supporting them in the richest possible way. Changed the whole story about having been abandoned. Because who they were being in life was abandoned. And when your being is abandoned, then that's what shows up in life. One abandonment after another. When you be loved and seen and supported, then that shows up in life. When we be worthy, very different experiences show up in life than when we be not good enough. Because that, all of this beingness, all of these stories that we have create the place from which we interact with the world. And we have all kinds of justification. We have all kinds of stories about it. We have evidence. And the more we're around, the more evidence we collect to justify and validate our stories. This is what human beings do. This is what our experience is. We are living a dream. We're dreaming our lives into existence. You know, we're storytelling our lives into existence. I don't know if you've ever had the experience in a dream where you actually made a choice, a conscious choice, and maybe even were aware that you were dreaming and changed the direction of the dream. That's no different from our daily lives. We can do it in any moment. We can change our narrative at any moment. And it can change the way we be because it changes the way we see. The way we be changes the way we see. The world is a different place when we're loved. The world is a different place when we belong. The world's a different place when we're worthy. When we don't have to prove ourselves anymore, when we can just be who we are without having to prove. And the who we are part, while lots of the superficial stuff that we're talking about is mutable, there's a core vibrance and light that we are that can express through all these different things. All the stories are overlays. What if we allow ourselves to be freer and freer and freer of those stories? It makes room for the light that we are, the unique light that we are, to shine more fully, more brilliantly, more vibrantly. The world's calling for us to step into our light, to step into our fullest expression, to shed the burden of these false narratives. The truth, I think the truth is that it's all narrative. So we can have the narrative be good, we can have the narrative be not good, right? We can have the narrative support us, we can have the narrative destroy us. But we're making it all up, good or otherwise. We're making it all up. And when we realize that we're making it all up, in the midst of making it up, we can make it up differently. So let's make it up in a way that it makes our hearts sing, that supports us. It's like, let's wake up and say, what kind of story can I tell today? What kind of epic can we create? That's what our lives are. They're epics. It's just we're creating our own movie with all the trials and tribulations and triumphs and delights, all of it. So let's take an active hand. Let's author our lives in a way that is epic. That's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel, as well as my own. And I invite you to like, follow, and share me and Enlightened World Network. And the links are in the description. It's always a privilege and a pleasure to spend this time together in the morning, exploring what it is together to be human. So thanks for being here. Until next time.